My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to EntreArchitect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. Today, I'm joined by two leaders helping define the next evolution of architectural practice through AI and digital twins. Michael Jansen is a trained architect, global practice leader, and serial entrepreneur who has spent decades rethinking how architectural services scale. And alongside him is Prasanta Bose, a technologist whose work in AI and machine learning has driven massive operational impact across global enterprises. Together, they're building TwinMaster. Today, we're going to explore what digital twins really mean for architects and how this technology can reshape how firms work, how they deliver value, and how they grow. Michael Jansen and Prasanta Bose, welcome to EntreArchitect Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. We're honored to be here, actually. So thanks, Mark.
Well, thank you. It's great to have you both here. I'm going to learn a lot here because I use AI a lot, like everybody is now using AI, but I'm not using it in terms of design tools. And I don't know anything about digital twins other than what they are and how they're used and why they would be used. And so this is going to be an interesting conversation for me because I'm going to learn a lot. And hopefully the audience will learn along with us. But before we jump into that, I'd love to know more about each of you. I want to know your origin story. So Michael, I want to start with you. When did you discover your passion for architecture and who or what inspired you to get started?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. I have to go back to university to start the story. I went to Yale starting off as an English major. And then my floor mate across the hallway was an architecture enthusiast. And I passed by him at the beginning of sophomore year on the way to a lecture by the famous Professor Vincent Scully on the history of American architecture. He said, "Michael, come along." So I went and joined the lecture. I fell in love, and then I started taking class after class. And before you knew it, I changed my major to architecture, and I was basically hooked for life.
You got hooked.
So I finished in architecture at Yale, and then I went to Cambridge in the UK subsequently to do a postgraduate degree in architecture, which was a very different approach, but also super worthwhile. I got to travel all over Europe and see things firsthand. So that's really got when I bit the travel bug. Eventually, that would take me to 90 countries and 1,000 cities over the subsequent 30 years, but that's where it all started. I think I fell in love with design first, to be honest. My career did not slant towards technology until much later. In fact, I was even suspicious of technology as a young architect. Throughout my 20s, I was focused on delivering large-scale projects. I first worked for a firm called John Portman and Associates out of Atlanta, and they did large-scale mixed-use work all over Asia primarily. I had moved to China right after Cambridge, and from 1991 to 95, I was working. First, I studied in China. I studied art for 2 years in Chinese art school. And then I moved to Beijing to practice architecture with a Taiwanese American architecture from the first of its kind in Beijing. And China was exploding with opportunity at the time. It was just getting started. And we all know what happened subsequently. So I got to see some really beautiful things get off the ground. I think that also inspired me. Then I got a Fulbright scholarship in 95 to go to India to study architecture through the School of Planning and Architecture, and ended up traveling across the country to almost all of its 30 plus states, seeing architecture of all kinds, from indigenous Mughal architecture to the British Raj architecture to mud huts. I mean, it was fascinating. And I went back to the States and then joined Portman. Portman sent me right back to India to open an office for them. So I ended up working for Portman for several years in India, opening their first India office, getting them their first projects in India. And then, Portman specialized in large-scale mixed-use complexes. So I remember distinctly my second year into the profession, this kind of explains how I ended up where I did. One of the partners came back and he pulled me into his office and said, "We want to groom you to be a partner and teach you how to get business for the firm, because you're the only guy on the floor who seems to know how to do that, possibly. We think. We're not sure. We think." So for the next 3 years, I shadowed him around the world, going into meeting after meeting, being absolutely lost. I had no idea what they were talking about. I didn't understand business. I didn't know how to get projects. I didn't understand client interaction. I was just overwhelmed, but slowly but surely, I kind of caught on. By the age of 30, I had some roots in large-scale hotel-based projects, and I ended up switching to Hirsch-Bedner and Associates out of Santa Monica, California, where I joined them and opened their India office. So it kept me in India for a long time, and there I was running around getting big, beautiful hotel projects for Hirsch-Bedner and taking care of the partners when they would fly in to do projects, and it was very exciting. I was learning a lot. But almost by accident, I ended up setting up a little cell in my office in India that made production drawings for one of their 11 offices. I think it was their Singapore office that called me up one day and said, "We need some extra help. We don't have any help. Can some of your architects please help us, finish some drawings up?" So that 2-person operation turned into a 45-person show within the next 2.5 years and became Hirsch-Bedner's second largest office. So in my early 30s, they asked me to be a partner and join the firm. I politely declined and decided that if this was so valuable to one firm, it must be valuable to many more firms too. And I ended up founding my own company called Satelier by the age of 35, which became the largest CAD and BIM offshore outsourcing service provider in the world with almost 700 employees that we scaled to over the course of 4 years. And we worked for 30 of the top 50 firms in the business by the time we were in year 4. And Sequoia Capital came in and put $15 million in the business alongside Silicon Valley Bank. And I got on CNN, CNBC, the BBC. It was kind of a bright lights, big city kind of a first real commercial or career success for me. I've never really cared about success. It just happened at the time, and I kind of flowed with it. We ended up exiting that company. And because we were dealing largely with CAD and BIM technology, I had to learn the technology. I could no longer just be a designer anymore. I had to learn the ins and outs of CAD and BIM. We were the biggest buyer of Autodesk software. We were the biggest buyer of Bentley software in the country at the time. So Carol Bartz came through my office. Greg Bentley came through my office. I remember those days very well. Subsequently, I founded a company called City Zenith, which really wanted to take advantage of the smart city movement and provide digital twin technology to cities to help them handle their massive, I call it big data problems, especially efficiency problems. And the thesis was that digital twins could organize all that complex data and help them to run more efficiently. That's a very high level. And we ended up doing a number of projects for cities like San Francisco and Barcelona and Chicago and others. And eventually we grew and exited that business. It was semi-satisfactory for me. It didn't scale the way my first business scaled, which was kind of through the roof. And the second one kind of bumped along. And I began to think that there's a better application of this technology out there. And it really needs to be more with the practitioners of the design profession than the city side or even the owner side. And I began thinking of working with the AEC industry again and leaving the city world. And that's when I met Prasanta, and he flew out to Chicago to meet me, and we talked, for ad infinitum. I mean, we were finishing each other's sentences. It was that kind of first meeting. Everything I ever wanted to do with technology, I finally found the guy who could actually do it. And what I knew would not happen with digital twins is they would never really deliver on their promise until they somehow figure out how to leverage AI. And there comes Prasanta, who is a global leading AI expert with a Lifetime Achievement Award from UMass and AI and all of his experience at Lockheed Martin and DARPA. He'll tell you the whole story. So Prasanta and I set out to build this wonderful product, which eventually became TwinMaster, powered by an AI co-pilot we call Archie that does something unique, which is multi-objective reasoning. It's actually designed to think like an architect or an engineer. And what we saw a lot of the tools in the industry doing were effectively leveraging AI for one-off purposes. Do this for energy, something for carbon, something for cost. But that's not how architects and engineers and contractors work. They have to think laterally across all of these different situations and determine the trade-offs and optimize between them. And that's why they use their brains, but it's a very tedious and imperfect art and science, if you will. And we think AI can play a huge role in making that happen. So today, we're in a place where we're about to launch TwinMaster and our co-pilot Archie by embedding Archie into some of the major modeling and BIM tools that already exist in the marketplace. So we don't compete with Revit and MicroStation and ArchiCAD and these products. Instead, we amplify them. And we'll be making announcements in the coming few months about various major AEC software firm partners that we will be working with to take Archie to market in the later part of the year. So it's been an exciting ride. I learn a lot from Prasanta. I think the hardest part of my job is trying to understand him because he thinks up here and I think down here. I'm a practitioner and a business person and a marketeer. I understand how to make buildings. I understand the core technology that goes in. I understand how architects and engineers work, but I'm not an AI expert. And that's where Prasanta came in and really, filled that badly needed to be filled role. So that's the story from my end. I'll let Prasanta take it from here and tell you his story.
Are you partners in TwinMaster?
We are fellow co-founders and partners.
All right, great. Prasanta, what's your story?
That's a very good one, Michael.
And we have plenty of time.
Yeah, my journey actually started, way back in Mumbai when I was doing my master's at ISC Bangalore, doing a kind of a master's project at TIFR, is a Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. It's kind of by the ocean, right? You're mingling with astrophysicists, mathematicians, and all kinds of people. But there was a very special person there who was R. Narasimhan, who was actually studying how children acquired languages. So obviously, it was counter to what we call the Chomskyan approach, the grammar built in, just like what you talk about. If it has grammar, it is generative, right? This guy was basically taking, what is the fundamental principles by which kids generate language, kind of thing. So I was looking at that. And then I got a chance to, work. I was obviously applying and looking into other centers which had teams, and I found UMass, which was a brain theory group led by Professor Michael Arbib. It had Andrew Barto, Rich Sutton. These were the Turing, recently this year they are Turing Award, right? So they had the team, and so I joined that group actually, with obviously got money research, and I remember those heydays. I would say where the first, I think the first week or second week, where Marvin Minsky comes in and talks about K lines and M lines, about the brain, right? And this is where we were looking at with Michael, like basically this idea of how does a frog, the basics of this perceptual motor coordination. How does a frog snap and catches a fly or a bee, right, kind of thing. There's different models of computation. It's basically, it's a very interesting because it talks about competition and cooperation in neural networks and large scale, scalable things. And they talk about schemas. So, when you were doing your thesis days, I was vigorously studying all kinds of stuff, from George Lakoff, philosophy, you talk about. And, this was a holy grail where one group, I remember there's this group, Risman and Hansen. These were the guys who were totally focused on symbolic AI, vision, right? Looking at knowledge and, creating hierarchical vision, symbolic processing of how you perceptually understand anything, that kind of thing. And then there was this Michael Arbib's group and the reinforcement learning group, like Barto and this where I was in, was looking at this, this neural foundations, right? And then there was this other group which was doing a distributed problem solving, Victor Lesser. How you scale, these scalable agents, solving, like this massive DARPA projects called speech recognition or stuff. But anyway, it's in that holy grail that I got trained, and I have, you can say, my roots went at that time from symbolic AI to actually at that same time into connectionist AI that you see today in neural networks. Actually, it's a little bit of a different thing, because at that time there was a sudden, you can see, emergence of this thing called spin model, and this is also one of the foundations by which nonlinear networks work. Right, I was about to actually go to Brown for a PhD in math, right, working with some of these connectionist theorists, right? And I was networking on and on. But at the same time, I suddenly, as I was finishing my second year, a few of my seniors had moved to Texas Instruments in an AI lab, and they said, "Hey, why don't you join us?" So I left because I don't know, because I had this bit to make sense. This was a Texas Instruments computer science lab, right? This was led by one of the leaders where I learned a lot, George Hallmeyer. He was the DARPA program director. He, and you'll hear this called the 10 tenets of what it means to innovate. Is the time right? What are you building? Is it solving a difficult, a real problem? Why does it matter? Is it feasible? There are these 10 questions. You're going to have posted it in LinkedIn, right? It's basically, you can say, the drivers of any startup that one could think of. But anyway, This is where I used to go into these quarterly meetings, since 3 ideas, pitch it, right? Kind of thing. It's like your Shark Tank, right? And with that thinking, right? But here I learned a lot of AI, because I was going into these AI workshops led by these stalwarts like McCarthy and, core AI guys, the logics of reasoning. And I used to go into Stanford Language Institute, right? Looking at reflective reasoning, right? On and on. Anyway, so from Texas Instruments, I should still finish my PhD. So I came back to USC, right? Again, a lot of AI. I joined this Information Sciences Institute, all AI people, okay? The person that I came to work with is Bill Swardowd, looking at explainable AI, right? How do you in natural language explain what you're doing, right? Kind of stuff. It's again generating text, but not in the neural net, you know what I mean? It's more of a symbolic computation, right? But I ended up doing a thesis, which is not necessarily like that, because I always had this anyway, it came out of, you can say, my master's, looking at, is there a foundation? Is there a logic by which one reasons? And my thesis was in compositional design of physical systems. How do people discover complex engines, right? Internal combustion. How do they invent, right? Out of that basic first principles of reasoning of physics, right? And to be generate these design structures, right? And also I came up with this kind of a generative way to think about this closed world reasoning. Anyway, I won't go into the math there, but fundamentally it was basically looking at complex systems. So I did my PhD. Another great mentor I found was Barry Bain. He was from Aerospace Corporation. He came in and we formed this Center for Software Engineering. I was the director there, holding, you can say, 20 enterprise leaders, right? Thinking about how do you build complex software? Cost as a driver, architecture as a driver. Is it sustainable? Is it doable, right? This is kind of a thinking of, this complex beast. How do you tame it and build it, right? This is also at the time I was learning how to do DARPA proposal, right? How do you take basically problems which are far out, right, and come up with innovative solutions? And so from there, from USC, I did a short stint. I said, maybe I should teach, right? I went to George Mason. I taught for 3 years. This was the dot-com era. It didn't go well in the sense, I used to bring the students and they used to go, after doing that thesis or something, big money go out, right? I said, no, this is enough, right? So I was at that time consulting MITRE Corporation, again, in the area of AI, right? I said, no, MITRE and stuff. I said, looking, maybe I should need to move to Silicon Valley, right? I ended up, for some reason, how I don't know, some connection, I think there was a manager who reached out to me, right? Hey, will you willing to join us? So I joined the ATC, Advanced Technology Center at Palo Alto, LePage's thing. And this is where I learned a lot from very excellent technical leaders, our Micah, right? These were days where literally Lockheed ATC was doing a lot of DARPA-funded, quote unquote AI. They had actually decimated the team. And I went in, with literally nothing in there and started literally going after DARPA. That is DARPA. These are cutting edge technologies. These are autonomous systems. And the first project, the first proposal I wrote was in the area of autonomous kill vehicles. How can you create a swarm of autonomous kill vehicles? You hear of today of drone, right? This is where I was partnering with MIT, right? These are very controlled theorists, right? How they swarm together and act not like it's like the kill versus, sensing, right? Because remember, Lockheed Space Systems was primarily in the sensing domain, right? This was in kill, right? But I did a range of projects there in the area of autonomous systems. One, I'll give you one classic example was that today, if you hear, right, today, space systems is very costly because of the size, mass, power, right? How do you create a modular way that you can launch, you can say massive payloads, right? Which can autonomously reconfigure itself to create, basically, you can say, detect very small movements of very tiny objects, right? Into different kinds of what they call as different apertures, right? In a robotic way. That is, they go up. They are just like what you see today in these telescopes, right? They unfold themselves, self-organize into these tessellated structures, right? But bottom line, out of the Lockheed is this very interesting set of projects I started getting into is this looking at this behemoth, you can say. We used to call them, it's like these dinosaurs, very slow to move, right? Knowledge sitting in all pockets, right? I said, no, this cannot sustain, this cannot grow, scale. And this is where I introduced the idea of digital twin. I was doing that anyway as part of another project, NASA, which is like the space web, that is viewing like everything as a twin, right? Even a satellite is, collecting and looking at the data as a twin, collecting the data. It has a life that is, you're looking at the forest, how it is evolving for forest fires, how the sun is, affecting the earth, right? So it started in that, I have publications there. It was obviously funded by NASA, right? And from there evolved the idea that actually, what Lockheed creates are basically this complex system, which has a very complex life cycle from design to, manufacturing to operations, whether these are space, whether these are vehicles, right, is to create a digital twin of that actually is literally an organic DNA going along with that product. You should say that obviously I had other ulterior motives. That is that this becomes more intelligent. It gives you visibility, how this product is behaving. Ultimately, there are these other principles I go by. That is this idea of quote unquote, this cognitive layer versus, the plant layer. Always the cognitive layer controlling the plant layer, right? So this was the thinking that I had. Anyway, this is where the digital twin concept was born in a complex world of physical systems, right? So anyway, I was doing one after another Dapper project. It seemed like, hey, this could be a startup. You know what I mean? So I'll give you another example. Like, how do you, create from first principles a Manet, right? A Dapper project, mathematically, right? Can you create a stack, right? Kind of, you would call it generative. But the things that I learned through that is also, I was teaming with the best of the minds, whether it's Stanford, whether it's Princeton, whether it's MIT, right? People who are optimization specialists, people who are network specialists, people who are autonomous systems, like Vijay at UPenn, right? And through that is network, you learn, right? You grow, you challenge the status quo as disrupting left and right. So then I went to do startup and says, what, I'm doing this, because I'm doing cradle to grave, you know what I mean? You define the proposal, you say, hey, get money. That means you have to, it's a zero-sum game, right? You have to get the bidding money, right? It's just like the Shark Tank, you got 100K, right? You create a proposal, you win it. If you lose, man, you lost it, right? Okay, you form the team and you harness the team expertise to create, something new. All right, anyway. So went on to startup, co-founded Falconry in the area of industrial IoT, right? It's still live, right? We sold and they are, again, it's taken a different life form. From there, I would say Falconry, I went into Starbucks, where I was trying to disrupt basically how you think about the coffee machine, about the coffee store, all with the idea of this organic thinking, that these are intelligent systems, that if you have a twin model of that becomes the cognitive layer to give you visibility to what's happening, how you control, how do you schedule, all kinds of things, even about your inventory, everything. You know what I mean? It's the digital layer, right? The DNA that I call, right? So from there, I went on to Equity Brands, again, the spaces of intelligent buildings, right? And now with Michael, right? It's basically that thinking that if you combine digital twin with AI, right, you are going to be able to transform the way you think about creating real solutions to real problems. And that's what we have created in TwinMaster.
Wow, what a story. That's some life so far. You got a long way to go with TwinMaster. Let's take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of this episode. This episode of EntreArchitect Podcast is supported by WeCollabify, one of our trusted allied partners. As this community has grown over the years, one thing has become very clear to me. The partners we choose matter. Allied partners are not sponsors. They're not advertisers. They are organizations that we've taken the time to get to know, to work alongside, and to trust. They understand the real pressures of practice and the responsibility that comes with leading a small firm. WeCollabify earned that trust by helping small firm owners address a challenge that sits at the center of long-term firm health, building capacity in a way that supports people, not just projects. Their insourcing model brings skilled design, BIM, and technical professionals directly into your team. They work in your time zone, inside your systems, and part of your day-to-day workflow. That integration allows firms to add capacity when it's needed, scale with intention, and grow without sacrificing culture, leadership focus, or quality of life. If you're thinking beyond short-term fixes and focused on building a firm that lasts, I encourage you. Go learn why WeCollabify is one of our trusted allied partners. Visit wecollabify.com/EntreArchitect to learn more. That's wecollabify.com/EntreArchitect. Gain lessons learned and credits earned with Arcademy, ARCAT's continuing education program. Listen to popular episodes of the Detailed podcast and earn AIA-approved HSW credits. Yes, you heard that right, HSW credits for episodes of Detailed podcast. Listen to an episode, check out the learning objectives, and use what you've learned while listening to take the course. The program is free, it's simple, and can be found at arcat.com under the Resources tab. Or just go to arcat.com/Arcademy. That's arcat.com/ARCATEMY. That's arcat.com/Arcademy. Please visit our sponsors today and thank them. Thank them for supporting you, the EntreArchitect community. So, Michael, can you tell me high level, what's TwinMaster and what's your mission?
So, TwinMaster's mission is to provide an AI co-pilot, much like, ChatGPT, if you will. And I was kind of very fascinated by how these algorithmic co-pilots, these LLM-based co-pilots like ChatGPT, Grok, Gemini, and Claude, do what they do. And we began thinking some time ago, what if we could apply something like this to the building industry? What would we do? How would it work? And the purpose of TwinMaster is really to leverage AI and core digital twin technology, or something specifically inside it called knowledge graph technology, to be able to allow architects to think about multiple considerations at the same time in a way that they never could possibly on their own, using traditional analytics or algorithmic tools, using AI. So it goes faster, the thinking is broader, you can optimize among and between considerations as opposed to doing them one at a time, which really isn't what's called for. And we thought, the process of designing, as I remember from being an architect, is really about balancing a multitude of performance indicators perpetually from the time you start designing until you're done. In the beginning of the concept and schematic phases in particular, you're thinking about carbon, cost, energy, zoning compliance, radiance, daylight, constructability, a wide range of options and things that you needed to have good answers for. And it's very difficult to ever get an optimal design naturally in that process. The design work tends to favor certain KPIs over others. And the real challenge is to figure out what are the best options we can offer an architect or an engineer in terms of being able to really understand the implications of all these design decisions that they're making, throughout the day. Today, architects will run 20 to 30 microsimulations in a single day using a variety of tools that don't interoperate, that don't have common architecture. And that really kind of messes things up a bit. There are too many single point tools in the industry. There's not really too many BIM tools, although you can also argue that that's the case too. There are some popularly well-entrenched incumbent tools that are pretty well used around the industry, but there's too many analytics tools, really. And we thought if we could consolidate this into one platform, if we could bring the power of AI, the power of deep reasoning, of multi-objective reasoning to the architecture profession, we could really enhance the quality of design work, make it faster, make it more efficient, produce better design results, and take a lot of the heavy lift out of that type of thinking out of the equation and give the architect a kind of permanent resource, if you will, that you can always refer to. I think of Archie, our co-pilot, as like the world's greatest design assistant. That's what we want it to be, right? And I today leverage multitude of AI tools in my everyday life. I use AI throughout the day for everything from writing emails to drafting documents to reviewing information to deep research. I use it for a variety of things. So I already have these assistants embedded in my life. And our goal is to create this ideal assistant that any architect anywhere working in any kind of project could use. It's not specific to small or large firms. We're working with very large firms in our beta program, and we're working with small companies too. We're working with solo practitioners. So I think it's going to have a particular impact on the smaller firms. They'll be able to do a lot more than they've been doing so far on their own with fewer staff and get a lot more done to their satisfaction. So from my perspective, it's about making design more efficient, making buildings more beautiful, making buildings more powerful in many ways. And I've been experimenting because my career started with hand drawing. I'm getting close to 60. I'm 56. And my first several jobs in architecture, we all did it with Rotring pens and pencils on Mylar, right?
Yep. I remember those days.
Oh, yeah. And then CAD came along later. But my training was in the traditional methodologies of working with your hands. So I remember early in my career when I was first introduced to 3D modeling software, I was astounded about what it could do for you. We design furniture and suddenly you can flip the chair upside down and see every single angle. And, it was just amazing what just the geometric modeling component of that could afford to an architect. Then later, we stumbled into the BIM revolution because I was running a CAD company that became a BIM company. And suddenly we were the ones who were providing BIM modeling services to companies that didn't know what BIM was back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, that kind of time frame. So the idea of having these information models that were not just geometric, but they were also informational at the same time. So if you made a change in the model, you change the databases, you change the information output. And then, of course, we all know that gave birth to a multitude of analytics tools that could tell you, well, this is how energy works, this is how cost will work, this is how daylight will work. And that's kind of where the industry went. And I think we all know what that's done for design over the years. So when we looked at the industry, we kind of, it's pretty well divided up by the major software companies that have entrenched tools that have millions of users already. Autodesk, Bentley, Trimble, Nemetschek, Chaos, McNeil. These are the big guys that have millions and millions of users. God bless the BIM 2.0 companies that are trying to compete with them out there. That's a whole nother game. I wish all my fellow entrepreneurs well, but I think they have a difficult assignment in front of them because Revit itself has 2.5 million users today. Trimble Connect has 37 million users. SketchUp has millions of users. You're fighting against tools architects already love. So the question was, not do we want to build another modeling tool, but how can we make all of those tools better than they are? And that's where I think AI comes in. The same way I learned back in my City Zenith experience that AI was really needed to power digital twins, I learned that AI is needed to power modeling tools for the design profession. So that's where we're headed with TwinMaster. And the user interface is very simple. Really, you're engaging with a co-pilot. There are not the multitudes of icons and buttons you would typically find in a CAD or a BIM software. You're really just asking questions, typing or talking and getting answers and iterating until you get what you need. And the key part of this is to be able to leverage Archie as a thinking assistant so you can really study trade-offs. You could ask for specific conditions. I have these cost conditions. I have these energy requirements. I have this daylight consideration. And so how do I get the best result given these conditions? That's really where we're headed with this software and where we think we can make these tools much more powerful. And I'll tell you that coming up in Q2 of next year, maybe even to Q3, we'll be announcing several major AEC firm partnerships where we're going to be embedded in a lot of the major modeling tools that the architecture profession already knows and uses. So we can't say it today, but you could probably guess who they all are. And we're in the process of integrating with those tools right now to make Archie a part of their ecosystem, if you will. And I couldn't be more excited about it because I think we picked the right niche and I think we're taking the right approach. We're not trying to compete with existing authoring tools that architects already love and have spent loads of money to learn, and they've deployed them and trained their staff around the world on these tools. I think what's really needed is not another modeling tool. I think what's needed is an advanced AI that can actually make those tools better for architects. And that's where we're headed with TwinMaster at a high level.
Could either of you walk me through a typical workflow with TwinMaster? You said that it's integrated into the software package. So let's say we're using Autodesk, right? We're using Revit, and it's a small commercial project. You said that you're also working with very large firms all the way down to small firms. So let's say we're working with a firm of, maybe 10 people. So a small firm doing a small commercial project. Typically, right, we all understand the current workflow. Now we have TwinMaster integrated into our Revit product. How does that workflow change with TwinMaster?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? So the way, as Michael said, right, that people are familiar with existing tools like the Revit or the Rhino in which they are modeled, right, kind of thing. So for the typical this small company, a firm that has few resources, the way we envision is that those tools still are the authoring tools. Right? It means they create models in their Revit model or a Rhino model thing, a sketch, right, kind of thing, right, or a master model, right. With our software, they can onboard. There's a two-part story into that. Onboard means you bring the model into our platform, right, kind of stuff, right. And we'll get outtake on that part. What does it mean? So there's that onboarding of the model. And then, obviously, any model that you create, this company, right, is not creating an architecture for the void. There's a target, project, which is at a particular site, right? So he creates this project site kind of thing, a twin in the real world, which is basically he or she interacts, right, literally with you can say, the world, right? In this case, the Google Maps, the 3D maps, right? In which they find, what's a good site, or they have a site target in mind where they can position, orient the building, kind of thing. And then they start interacting with that model to do a couple of things, right? Think this way, that at the end of the day, the architect or the lead architect or the architect on record, what they're trying to do is make a set of architectural decisions, actually, that is strategic in terms of it is predictive of the construction issues, just like Frank Gehry did. He builds a design. He thinks, hey, is this feasible? Is this going to be, if it is a deconstructive architecture, how's the environment going to interact with respect to the weather conditions, whether how the light is coming in, what kind of thermal comfort is it going to? Is it be tolerable by this thing? So what you're looking at is that you get into that kind of, you can say, once you create this site-specific twin, you start interacting in an intentional manner. That means in the goal-driven, that means you're talking, hey, what kind of energy demand, given that this is the function, this is the occupancy level. So all of these, you can say, are giving you feedback in terms of the different kinds of KPI, sensory feedback. You can take that and then you also interact and say, hey, given this kind of feedback, and these are my objectives, where I want to, reduce this or improve that or optimize that. What are my options, right? Then you're playing a kind of exploring the options in a goal-directed or an objective-driven manner, right? So you can say, this is again my thinking about how people work, or actually in a real world is this sense, decide, act, right? You're sensing, you're making the decision kind of thing, and then you're acting. That means you're going to be making some changes to the design, refining them, right? So as they go along in this journey of this kind of a predictive design, that, as Michael was saying, that he's not only going to be designing for these kinds of KPI or performance, whether it's energy, whether it's carbon, whether it's the thermal comfort, whether it's this thing properly oriented to maximize usage of solar energy for solar, right? On and on, right? He's also interested in the cost, the compliance, the clashes, right? Kind of stuff, right? And so you can say today's world, right? People work in Excel and all of these tools, right? Kind of thing. So the system automatically, you can say that as if you got an agent which is doing a costing, a guy who is doing a compliance, a guy who is doing different analysis, right? So they create these models and augment this, right? And gives you feedback of saying, hey, this would be the cost breakdown. This would be the bill of materials kind of thing, right? And he can give you a cost breakdown, not by just a monolith, but literally in a kind of a layered manner, saying, hey, first floor will cost you this much, second floor will going to cost you. It's like a schedule that are you cost planning wise, right? Second is that an important factor when you're bringing in quote unquote AI, and we're not getting into the how we bring in AI, right? Is this how do you build trust, right? How do you sort of basically get the user be just like the what I call as the supervised autonomy, right? The human is still in the driver's seat, the architect, right? So he should be able to give you feedback and modify. It says, you know what, these cost attributes you got, these compliance rules are not applicable, right? And so he can actually tune those models, right? And then the agents are then operationalizing it in the sense they are going to be tracking as you make changes, right? So as part of that story, that workflow that I said, he onboards it, he creates the project, and he is then continuously, you can say, augmenting it along with other players. So this is not a single person environment, it's a multiplayer, right? Both agent-wise as human-wise. It's like human cross-agent interaction that is happening. The reason is, again, you take, how would, Frank Gehry would have operated today, right? He goes in, right? But he has a bunch of other people who is assisting him. Somebody doing cost, somebody doing that, right? He harnesses that. And to tomorrow's world, where TwinMaster is going to create is as if the architect is literally unlocks his ability to, you can say, exploit the powers of these agents, right? Which can be also be human guided too, human in the loop, he's something themselves, right? He's basically working with a team of agents, right? And managing them to get the most productive and the best decision he can, right? That's the power of TwinMaster. You see what I'm saying? So this AI, that's the slight takeaway that I'm going to take is this, is the thinking is the world tomorrow of the enterprise world of how, the small firm or big firm, right? Is that you always work in a team. But in this case, the team is not just humans, it's agents which are specialists, right? Who can invoke, today, yesterday, right? You used to spend hours, you had basically touch labor, right? Hey, can you do me this thing, integration? He goes and spends 2 weeks to come back and does a, Excel or a grasshopper simulation. Gone are those days, seriously gone, okay? Today, it's not necessarily, this is what I bring in. That's why how I created the envision is that you bring in engineering and AI together to solve challenging problems, right? So what are you doing? You're using AI to dynamically configure or adapt these tools to meet your objectives, right? You're not just doing the simple AI of generating ChatGPT. So that's why I typically don't like ChatGPT, sense. It's this idea of core AI, right? And this is another thing that I want to bring about, right? Why you can ask, why digital twin? The power is like this. If you look at it again, a team yesterday was basically, you can say, each one is on its own, you can say, stovepipe, each silo, right? Kind of thing. Team members, they're cleaning and they're throwing over the wall. Hey, this is your thing, this is your that. But what is the digital twin doing? It is what is called as typically in the AI world called a state model, a shared state model. The shared state model is allowing you, right, as it is evolving, people are impinging on it, changing it, right, modifying, giving shape to it, and it's giving you feedback. Is this okay? Is this conflicting? Is it right? Right? So this is how this is based on the deep understanding of how autonomous systems work. They have, and you'll hear Lacoon talking about the state-based operation, right? It's generation, right? But you're using a state of the world. So still the world is the design state or the construction state or the operation state. And this is modeled by that digital twin. It is just not mesh. It is state plus behavior. Mesh plus behavior.
Oh, you made many good points, Prasanta. I think I just wanted to build on what you're saying. We kind of look at the workflow as from model to twin to insight to impact. It's like that. And you're really engaging with the model, whatever your source authoring software is, and you're iterating, leveraging the AI to continuously improve and enhance that model to your satisfaction. And what's unique about what we've developed is that it's designed to span the entire life cycle of the building, from design to construction, ultimately to occupancy. So that digital twin will then be something that can be passed through by architects onto the contractor and onto the owner. And we'd like to see architects at some point get into the business of delivering digital twins to their end client and
I agree.
generate a new revenue stream for themselves by becoming basically digital twin makers, which I think is something that they should take seriously. And fees are being squeezed left, right, and center. Contractors are taking more of the responsibility in-house now than taking it away from architects. I'm a traditional architect. I'm a protector of the architecture and engineering professions. And I think that there are many things that we can do to build out our scope and menu of services, from a business perspective, to make the firms, better businesses than they traditionally have been.
When you onboard the model into TwinMaster and you start using the AI, I understand that you're asking it questions and you're having it analyze the building and giving you feedback and giving you data. What is the feedback? What is the output of the AI? Is it actually modifying the model and showing you different versions of a model that gives you different scenarios? Or is it giving you back data? Or is it giving you back text? How is it actually communicating with you?
So let me again take that, right? So, there are different things going on here, right? Again, if you remember when we talked about quote unquote, let's say energy demand or carbon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, that's data, right? In the form of information that is grounded. And this is another, you'll hear the word context is such an important thing in generative AI, in any transformative architectures, in any reasoning for that matter, right? So what it is doing is it is giving you that kind of an information aspects, right? In aspect, I mean is there's different dimensions in which you are reasoning, right? And it is augmenting. Okay, the model, the state model, the twin model.
So it's actually changing the model and showing you different versions.
Let's say you started with a quote unquote a BIM model. Out of the Revit model,
yes.
You constructed the idea that what we create is what is called as a systems-oriented twin model. That means it is any building is composed of subsystems of components of relations, has a deep ontological, and this what Michael talks about, this knowledge graph kind of thing, right? Understanding that we bring into TwinMaster, right? So when we basically reason, whenever I say reason, that means it's a combination of both AI and agent doing reasoning, right? That where you are saying, hey, you asked for this, what's the intent behind it? What's the context around it? And then, what do I need to run in quote unquote deep, think about skills. Simulation is a skill that you have, right? It's like a robotic effector, which I'm saying, what do I need to manipulate versus what I need to infer. So we bring the two together. Inference and simulation go hand in hand. You see what I'm saying? Simulation is a computation. You see what I'm saying? You run simulation. You configure a tool, just like an end effector. You turn the world, right? Yeah. So you bring the two together. LLM is doing generative inference. You see what I'm saying? Saying, hey, given this context, what does it imply? Given this thing, do I see a conflict? There's different kinds of inferences it does very well, right? It encodes different kinds of knowledge. So it does unification, generalization. You see what I'm saying? Because it can say, hey, what, for example, energy demand here is the carbon. What is the relationship between that, right? That's, built out of LLMs. You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we actually, going back to your question, we augment, right, with different things. One is, as we said, these kinds of KPIs. We augment and build out cost models, right, kind of thing, right? We ground out, right? We not only synthesize, you can say compliance rules as stuff generated from either you tell me what the document is, I'll parse it out, all I'll get from somewhere else, right? And through user, I'm going to refine, mold those compliance into operational rules that I execute and track. So it's again, I keep on emphasizing this very importance of engineering and AI. They're intertwined with each other. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not just saying, the classical chatbot like a story, because building is a complex system.
So it's doing all of it. It's giving you data, it's giving you text-based communication, and it's actually giving you augmented versions of your model.
The text-based is part of the interaction story. It can generate the report. Underlying is a representational structure of the digital twin.
Got it. So it's doing everything you want it to do.
Yes.
That's our hope.
Very interesting. So you said that you're in beta. When is the plan to launch and have this all? I think you mentioned it earlier. So what is the plan for the future of TwinMaster?
So we're going to be in beta for another few months, most likely into the end of March. And then we'll begin rolling out in the second quarter of this year. we'll be working with different software companies rolling out in sequence, not all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be making announcements with one partner after the next. And we are in the middle of developing those joint go-to-market strategies at the moment. So there'll be press releases and social media and all the fun stuff around that. But you can count on Q2, Q3.
So we'll start
We'll
seeing
be in the market.
Yeah.
People will be able to start seeing the product available in the various marketplaces of these incumbent software companies.
So from a business point of view, are we going to see marketing from TwinMaster, or are we going to be seeing marketing coming from your partners saying that TwinMaster is now part of what we're doing?
Both.
Both, okay.
Both. The reason is that the brilliance of the business model scaling strategy is that we leverage the existing sales channels of these partners that have in 200
Yeah,
countries.
it's brilliant. Yeah.
But at the same time, we are obliged to make some noise on our own so people know who we are and we can point them to the right place in the various marketplaces and ecosystems that these companies have. So as any new company, we'll be blowing our own horns really to help bring knowledge of our existence and what we do to the industry. But we're not going to be door-to-door selling like you might find in other. We will be really amplifying the efforts of the other companies that we're going to market with.
Great. You mentioned beta and that it's still open. Are you interested in having some of our community be part of it?
Absolutely. We'd love that. We are working with a number of firms right now, big, medium-sized, and small. We have a lot of big firms and we would like some smaller firms. So if anyone is interested, they can reach out to us directly and we'd love to have a conversation with you about taking part in the beta.
What's the best way to connect with you for that?
I would say email us directly. I'm Michael at TwinMaster.com and Prasanta is Prasanta, Prasanta at TwinMaster.com. And then we'll get in touch and have a conversation.
All right. Awesome. So if you're interested, give them an email and then you can get to play with it. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Your feedback would be very important to us because half the firms out there in the world are big firms and half the firms out there are small firms. So we want to keep everybody happy and we'd love to be able to serve you the same way we're serving some of the larger firms out there.
Yeah. And you get a little preview of the future.
We hope so. We'd love to show you what we have.
Very cool. Final question. I asked this one to everybody. You guys are running a business. You've run multiple businesses.
Mm-hmm.
What's one thing that a small firm architect can do today to build a better business for tomorrow? I'll start with Michael.
Sure. I think, there are a lot of things you probably could do. I could talk about what the integration of AI into your practice could mean. I think that you simply will be able to do more with less. And I think really the idea is to do more with the existing staff that you have, to train your staff to leverage the power of existing tools that can amplify their efforts. They can get a lot more done in less time. It'll be more accurate. I think they'll be more satisfied with the outputs. And I think that's going to help just in terms of making design fees more efficient and profitable. And then I think there's the whole opportunity to get into the digital twin business where you can begin as you're building these digital twins and you're augmenting them with information. Those are very powerful tools that can then be passed on to the other participants in the AECO ecosystem. You go to the contractor, it can go to the owner as a tool that they would use ad infinitum, especially the owner. So architects traditionally have the ear of the owner. That's their uniqueness. They're the confidant of the owner. So I think owners will listen to the architect that comes and says, listen, I've got this new approach for you. Typically a BIM model today, after design and construction, is put on a shelf or a server somewhere, never heard from again. All that effort, all those hours that went into building that BIM model, and it's over. You have to start again on the next project. Why? You should be able to earn a residual on that for the life cycle of the buildings. You actually get to participate in the commercial success of the buildings that you design over their life cycle. And if you do that often enough, I think it's a significant business stream and something that could substantially change the numbers for any practice.
Yeah. And not only build them, but also manage them and maintain them into the future for the buildings they design.
Absolutely.
What a great opportunity. I think many architects early on are afraid of AI and what it could do to our profession. But I look at AI as an Iron Man suit for architects. It's like it's going to make us superheroes, right? That it's going to allow us to continue to do what we're doing, but at a much higher level, very fast, do things that we never could imagine that we could do.
I agree. I think it's an excellent metaphor.
Very exciting. Prasanta, what's your thought? What's one thing that an architect can do to build a better business for tomorrow?
I was going to say he can become a Frank Gehry of tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
It's a very simple principle. The principle is this, right? Yesterday, the knowledge was hard to get access to, number one. It was hard to operationalize that knowledge. You have to spend a lot of time integrating, putting out from your brain into these grasshoppers, into these Rhino tools, right? What is coming to the table now is that now knowledge is available. Frank Gehry's knowledge of how he created deconstructed architecture is available to you, right? But the key thing is that how do you operationalize that? So for somebody who is thinking of that architecture, if he can build on the shoulders of these giants, right? And create, as if he has literally, think this way, he's game playing different players, right? The owner, the builder, the cost planner, the constructor, the contractor. He is in his tips, literally, not with touch labor, not with emotion. These agents are not emotionless. You see what I'm saying? They are working for you, right? All you have to do is tame those guys, manage them, think as a generalist, just as Frank Gehry was doing, right? Deconstructing this, thing. Hey, I don't care about form function. Give me a curved structure like this, right? So, like the sky is the limit. You're opening. You're becoming an open architect that is rapidly changing and making things that actually will work. Because this is what Frank Gehry was. He was struggling, right? He was getting computer simulation. It takes hours because, these limits, tomorrow come back after a week. No, you don't need a week for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that having that, in your fingertips, being able to leverage that and turn it into decisions, I think, into action, into money is something that will, empower and unlock the real architect of the individual.
Michael Jansen and Dr. Prasanta Bose are their names. The company is TwinMaster. I have a feeling that you're going to hear a lot about them in the future. If you want to learn more about them now, it's thetwinmaster.com is the website. And it's Michael at thetwinmaster.com and Prasanta at thetwinmaster.com if you want to get involved in their beta. Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing your knowledge here today on EntreArchitect Podcast. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark, thank you very much. It's a wonderful conversation.
You're very welcome. If you enjoyed this episode of EntreArchitect Podcast, please share a link with a friend, because that's how we've continued to grow and serve thousands more small firm architects just like you. Thank you to our sponsors for this episode. Links to the sponsors and all the resources we discussed today, they are all available in the show notes for this episode at entrearchitect.com/podcast. EntreArchitect is a proud member of the Gable Media Network. It's the multimedia network moving the architecture, engineering, and construction industries forward through the power of storytelling. You can earn AIA continuing education credits by listening to select episodes of this podcast and many others at gablemedia.com/members. And if you are a small firm architect, listen up. Join us today at EntreArchitect Network. It's the worldwide community for entrepreneur architects. We've been around since 2012, and our basic level is now free to join. Yes, you can join EntreArchitect Network for free. And that gives you access to valuable business resources and our global community of architects. And you can upgrade anytime for live coaching, AIA-approved training, and mastermind support. So visit EntreArchitect.com to learn more and to get started. My name is Mark R. LePage. Thank you for listening to the EntreArchitect Podcast. Love, learn, share.